Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Punch, Kick, Choke Chat, 6:30 my time, because I'm back in Calgary. I'm so excited to be able to travel with this show. You know, this thing started during the pandemic, and the benefit, now that we're technically out of it, however you want to think about it, is that we still get to connect across great distances because of what we created during the pandemic. My name's Sean Benson. I'm one of your hosts. And it gives me great pleasure to chat tonight with Kyoshi, who's asked us to call him Sensei Ryan Bodrug tonight. And Sensei, we always jump right into a question and then we do a little bit of intros later on. So I'm going to throw out two ideas that we were discussing, one of them before the show started, and another one we've talked about a bit on the show, but we haven't touched on it a ton and not a ton lately. So let's start with that. Karate. Yeah. We all know what karate is, but you know, on your website, and we say this ourselves, we say Okinawan karate. Why do you say Okinawan karate? What's the difference? And why does it matter?
Well, I don't know how much it really matters. I wouldn't say karate is my main expertise, but just based on what I've learned from my sensei, that there is a little bit of structure difference between mainland Japanese karate and Okinawan karate. And for that, my sensei always wanted to make that distinction. So I've always carried it forward as such. And I've heard that, again, because I'm not as well versed as you guys and others for sure, but I've heard that, you know, mainland Goju-ryu is different than Okinawan Goju-ryu and so forth. But I'm sure what you'll learn from this podcast, I pretty much live in a cave and don't really know what other people are doing out there. I just follow my sensei and I've been training for a long time. So I'm not really sure what the culture is out there, funny enough. I just know Okinawan Goju-ryu through Yamanaka sensei, and I love it very much. I think it's incredible art.
Right on. So I imagine you might answer the same way, and I think this answer might be more obvious, but the same would go for Jiu-Jitsu versus Japanese Jiu-Jitsu. You know, what's the determination that makes that matter?
Well, Jiu-Jitsu is an interesting conversation. I can speak more to that, just simply because it's been my primary art. And, you know, I think a lot of this is a matter of opinion and debate, but I mean, if you look historically and through lineages as they perforate around the world and how other influences change the art, to me, Japanese Jiu-Jitsu still embodies a good connected lineage that you can support, you know, with documents and whatnot, and also would have to have some knowledge that I would like to say some deep-rooted knowledge that would have come from the Japanese Jiu-Jitsu from mainland Japan many years ago. Now, I don't know if that sounds whimsical or superficial to say that, you know, how do you prove something like that? I mean, I can speak to the concept of Jiu-Jitsu and the principles applied to it when we're talking about pliability, soft power, that kind of stuff. And I've only ever learned it through that sort of Japanese artery. And it makes a lot of sense that, you know, the samurai would have needed to use these principles, fighting all day, wearing armor, having heavy weapons. If you don't learn to relax your movement, you're going to gas out. So I still think there's some validity in making certain claims, Japanese Jiu-Jitsu or otherwise. But at the end of the day, you know, maybe we don't take ourselves too seriously, because good principles are good principles. And if you've stumbled across them, whichever way you've done it, it's not wrong. And if you have had some influence in your art through a Japanese lineage, I guess at some point, if there's enough of it, you can consider yourself, you know, a Japanese lineage legacy teacher, if you can support documents and grade properly and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I don't really over focus on it. I mean, we have that connection. I have that lineage. I've only ever learned Japanese Jiu-Jitsu from people who have learned Japanese Jiu-Jitsu from going to Japan, from seeing teachers that have come from Japan, from various different styles. Shindo-ryu is our flagship style, but there's been a lot of influences in our Jiu-Jitsu style through the generations. Daito-ryu, Asiyama Ichiden-ryu, Hako-ryu. And so all those are accredited, you know, Japanese arts. Yeah, so, you know, I guess there is some value to speak into it, but again, it's, you know, I wouldn't get into a big political war over it. It's not worth it.
Right on. We'll go to you, Sensei Suino, and then Hanshi, I'll go to you next to talk about the Okinawan karate part. But Sensei Suino, you can talk about that too. But, you know, I've rolled with you, and it's indistinguishable from rolling with an excellent BJJ guy, but you do Japanese Jiu-Jitsu. So how important is that lineage? And And what difference does it make when we get down to it?
Well, I got to throw something else in the mix, which is judo, right? So I learned my groundwork from doing competitive judo for decades. And most of what I considered jujitsu up until, 20 years ago was Japanese jujitsu, mostly standing techniques, joint locks, throws, strangles, takedowns, submissions on the ground, but not rolling, right? But in training for judo groundwork, we rolled. I rolled when I was 7 or 8 when I first started, still
Right.
rolling today, 55 years later. And so along with that, you can't live in a grappling art these days and ignore BJJ, right? You can't ignore wrestlers, you can't ignore BJJ. So if I feel like, if you roll with me and it feels like you're rolling with somebody who does BJJ, it's because that influence has crept into the world of judo grappling, right?
Sure.
As has wrestling, et cetera, et cetera. So I draw pretty sharp distinction, at least in my experience, between Japanese jiu-jitsu, which for me has been 95% stand-up, self-defense style martial arts, versus rolling, which came to me from judo grappling, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Hanshi Legacy, Okinawan karate. What is Okinawan karate versus Japanese, or what other people maybe think of as karate?
The way I understood the question would be is, why would you make that difference?
Yeah.
There are, like, your intention, like Shorin intention when they did their karate was to just kill the other guy. It's a different type of self-defense than Shotokan self-defense. Yes, you'll knock the guy out, but when you're facing 3 people, you can't have the self-defense, and you don't have a punch, and also it's all in the training in that sense. And then if you're referring to a certain technique, you're talking about the insides or parts of your art, and you would say, okay, we're doing Kusanku, and you may say the Japanese or the Okinawan, simply because there's a slight difference,
Right.
and an underground meaning to it. Basically like that. But as we said before, Sensei Ryan and I already mentioned that all the outside physical parts may be different, but on the inside, it all does the same way.
Right on. Sensei Dauphin, I know you popped on a little late, and we were just chatting about the idea, just even on his website says Okinawan karate, Japanese, I was just saying, what are those things, and what does that delineation matter compared to, let's say, a Japanese karate?
This is just an opinion, like this isn't an authoritative statement, but I like to think that Okinawan karate, if we're talking about karate, I can't speak to jujitsu or other arts, but Okinawan karate, the function dictates the form. So what you're doing is what dictates how the technique is done, what you want to happen. And in my opinion, sometimes in Japanese karate, because of what Funakoshi did when he brought it there, it became more about the form and not the function. So you need to look a certain way, and then you start trying to make that look fit into how you defend yourself, right? And I think there's a lot more complexity and nuance in Okinawan karate, as far as lots of takedowns, lots of joint locks, lots of nerve strikes, lots of, it's not just a percussive art where obviously primarily, percussive, punch somebody, elbow them, knee them, but there's a lot more to it in Okinawan karate, in my opinion, right? And in what I've seen.
Right.
And I've trained in both places. I've trained in Okinawa and I've trained in Japan.
I'm smiling, and I'm going to use something you said as a pivot to the next question I want to touch on before we get to intros, which is, I'm not an authority on this. This isn't authoritative. And I'm just smiling because, as a seventh Dan, just like our guest, there's an authoritative quality, whether you want there to be or not. And to that end, that pivots me. Before, when we were talking, Sensei Bodrug, we said, how would you like to be addressed? And you're like, Ryan. And we're like, yeah, that's probably not going to happen. And you said about Sensei Dauphin that you like the word sensei because, there can be a lot of Randys, but maybe there's not as many senseis. And I want to ask you why you think that matters, and what a sensei's earned as far as you consider it? Why would you rather call someone like Randy Dauphin, Sensei Dauphin, even though you hold the same rank?
I don't think it's so much about rank. I've called people my senior with lesser rank sensei, and I would gratefully call people outside of the dojo sensei if the culture in Canada permitted it. To me, sensei is someone who's walked before. I know in Japan it's used, for a variety of things, if someone of senior position. For me, because I've learned this culture through this martial art lifestyle that I've had and experienced. Sensei is a very sacred term. It doesn't just mean one who's walked before. It's the way you say it matters. What's in your spirit when you say the words. And to me, it's a great honor to be able to almost pay a blessing, pay gratefulness to that person for being a sensei. And I simply do that through the word of calling them sensei. It's acknowledging that they have something to share and offer that's sacred, that's unique. And I think it's just a polite thing to pay recognition to that when you're speaking to them.
Right on. I'm going to go to you, Sensei Dauphin, because I think you and I nodded at the exact same time when he said, "What's in your spirit?" Why does Sensei matter? Why don't, you could call Hanshi by his first name. You're friends as well. Why don't you?
I never have. I've never called Sensei Suino or Sensei Legacy by their first name. Never. It's and I remember actually one of my seniors in Legacy Shihan once saying to me, you can just call him Gary, like I call it. And I think he felt a little weird because I never called him that. I always said Sensei Legacy, Sensei Legacy, Sensei Legacy. And the thing, when we're talking about that reverence for that term, the question I ask people is, when did you get to know your father well enough that you could call him by his first name and you didn't address him as dad?
Right.
No, you didn't, because you only have one dad, and you call that person dad. And if there's another person that you're lucky enough, you have a stepfather or somebody that you can call dad, then you're blessed by being able to address more than one person in that way. And that's the reverence I have for Sensei. It's equal with a parent, a father, a mother, and I really like what you said, Kyoshi, when you said, it's the way you say it as well. It's the way you say it. I've heard Sensei Suino say many times, when you come to JMAC, you have to bow. And not only do you have to bow, I have to see that you're sincere when you bow. You have to bow with sincerity. And I think you need to say the term sensei with sincerity, not just off the cuff, yeah.
Before we go to Sensei Suino on this, I just want to throw out, what you said, Sensei Bodrug. I have an acting student. I teach them acting and they call me sensei. They've never taken martial arts with me. They've never taken martial arts. And I'm like, I love you calling that. They go, you're my, with full sincerity, you're my acting sensei. And I appreciate that. And I hear you. And I accept you calling me that. I like that we can apply that outside of this world. Sensei Suino, why do senseis matter? Why aren't you buddying up and, hey, what's up, Joey?
Can't do it.
I love that.
Once somebody's your sensei, they are always your sensei. Even if you stop training with them, they're always sensei, right? It's a term of respect. Even senseis that I've had minor fallings out with, I still refer to as sensei, right? I don't know. It's just part of our culture. I'll tell you a funny story. It kind of reminds me of what you just said about acting. I may have told you this before, but back in the days when I practiced law, one of my longtime judo students was a lawyer, and I was trying to get out of the law practice and do other things. But about once a year, he'd call me up and say, hey, listen, I just need somebody on the other side of this case. It'll take you a week or two. You'll make a ton of money. You gotta do this. And he said, we got this deposition coming up. And I go, oh, okay. The client he wanted me to represent just wrote this check that I couldn't turn down. So I walk in, we're sitting around the conference table, and there's all these guys they live in the United States, but they're all Indian. So from India. And so their sense of culture and hierarchy is extreme, right? In India, who's your social, equal and who's above you and who's below you. And we're sitting here at this legal table and we're supposed to be having this big fight. and the guy has to call me sensei. And so for 2 hours during this deposition, this poor guy's calling me sensei the whole time. He goes, I just can't not call you sensei. And all the guys on his side of the aisle were steamed because he was giving me way too much respect. Right? It just runs deep, and I got a great check out of it. So no complaints whatsoever.
Nice. Nice. Hanshi legacy. Why sensei? Why does that matter?
Order. I would say order so that everybody knows where everyone is. By that, I don't mean the guy is worth more, but you could ask the sensei a question and you would get the proper answer. You know what I mean? Like that. A student or yellow belts, all the titles and all the outward signs of who you are being at that time are all, in my opinion, for order. So if Fred in the corner yells line up and he's a yellow belt, you know, most people are not going to go to the wait for the sensei. You know, that was a lousy example. But, and again, that sign of respect at a sensei. Again, I have called Benny Allen, but I have never, because I'm describing somebody to him, who's your sensei, Benny Allen. But I have never went and said, hey, Benny, can you show me a punch? That's right now is the first time I ever said that. Or Sensei Sen. It's just the respect that that person has earned from you, I think, is why you call him sensei.
Right on.
It's not his idea, it's your idea.
Yeah. And just to put a little button on that for me, you know, Sensei Bodrug, you said it's how you say it, and Sensei Dauphin, you said that. We've been in a room with like 7 people who are all sensei, and everybody know who's talking about who. Like, because of how it's said, everybody just nobody has to go, which sensei did you mean? And even people who aren't in the martial arts community will be like, yeah, I kind of get who everybody's referring to somehow, because we all say it based on who the person is and who we are to them. Ladies and gentlemen, we are here with Sensei Ryan Bodrug, and I am here, Sean Benson, as one of your hosts, with the first human I ever called sensei, Hanshi Gary Legacy, with Sensei Nicholas Suino, who's taught me so many things and has blown open my mind with that ground game and how that added to my martial arts, and with my sensei, Randy Dauphin. And they are our co-hosts tonight, and Sensei Dauphin is going to tell you everything about our friend, and what he doesn't tell him, Sensei Bodrug will tell us.
Thanks, Sean. So Sensei Ryan Bodrug is a 7th degree black belt and Yamanaka-ha Shindo-ryu Jujutsu. He also holds a teaching title of Kyoshi and Kancho, which means he's the head of a school. He owns and operates the Toronto West Jiu-Jitsu. I'm sorry, Kyoshi, if I say this wrong. It's Kisatsu Dojo. As well, he has the rank of first Q in Takeda-ryu Iaido, which I know that he does because I've taught Iaido on the floor and watched him do Iaido, and he's very good at Iaido. He's really good. He started training with the late Shihan Jack Donovan in 2000 in Belleville. His main teachers include Ron Yamanaka Shihan and another late Darren Smith Shihan. His senseis instructed him from the early days in martial arts to study traditional and modern combative forms of Jiu-Jitsu, Kung Fu, and Okinawan Karate. And he has a strong base in mixed martial arts. He's friends with people that we all know. He's good friends with Scott Taylor and Sean DeJong. That's where we met in Sensei DeJong's dojo. We've taught at the same seminars. And one thing I want people to know about him is that when I watch him, I've always been blown away by how good his technique is. I mean, his technique is beautiful when you watch him. But the interesting thing is, it's just as beautiful when he applies it on people. So it's not like you see a lot of people who can do really beautiful technique in a room alone, but then when somebody puts their hands on them, they can't recreate that same beauty. He can. I've seen it with my own eyes. He can do it. He's really, really good, super knowledgeable about that. we posted this, but I think it's worth saying again. These are Kyoshi Bodrug's words. We are dedicated to the teaching of traditional martial arts and the biomechanical correctness of modern and classical combat systems. At this school, we follow the principles of Budo, the way of the warrior. It's our belief that Budo, in its purest form, is not a study of destructive behavior and violent action towards people. Instead, it is the study of conflict resolution, restoring peace and understanding the nature law. That's Kyoshi's words. And that's how I want to introduce him, because I think that's a great way to open this up, Sean. And I'm really happy that he's here. Really glad to see him. And I know I'm going to see him lots, but happy to talk to him tonight.
Well, thank you so much, Randy. Wow, Sensei. That's amazing. That's quite an intro. You know, I'm really blessed to be here with you guys, and I have a tremendous amount of respect for Sensei Randy, as I've met him a few times, and I know we're going to be like really good friends. There's no question. And the more we train and get together, the more we realize our synergy is the same. And though I haven't met Sensei Legacy and Sensei Benson and Suino, I definitely look forward to meeting you guys, and it's a real honor to be here. I know you guys are all stand-up guys. I can tell. I didn't listen to a lot of podcasts, like just a couple, but you know, I was blown away. I was like, wow, these guys get it. Like you know, sometimes you feel like there's not a lot of you around, martial artists who really express the life of a Budoka in this way, and I know you guys have that in your spirit. So to me, it's a blessing. Like I feel very happy and grateful to know that you guys are out there sharing the art the way you do.
Thanks so much, Sensei. Real quick, for everybody here on the Zoom call, we're so happy you're here. And at the bottom, there's a chat button that is going to be lit up, and you're going to be able to drop in your questions for Sensei Bodrug there. And if you're watching on YouTube and you're either watching on the live stream or you're watching later, hit that subscribe and like. And same with the podcast, you know, share it, tell your friends, and send us some of that baking you're doing while you're listening. Sensei Bodrug, there's a question I normally ask first, but I'm going to give it a sec because the words come up twice now, and you just said something that we appreciate, but that idea of a Budoka. You know, our first ever podcast we did was with Sensei Suino. And it's one of the first questions I asked him is, what is this Budo? We hear this word so much. You know, there's karateka, and there's martial artists, and there's MMA gyms everywhere. So what would make someone, in your estimation, what makes you a Budoka?
That's a good question. You know, in my personal opinion, and I feel everybody's entitled to their own. You know, Budo it means the way of the warrior, but it's like an expressed way, like a spiritual way, like a lived way. It's not a physical action way where you're like doing the physical action of being a warrior. It's actually, it's more internal, and therefore outwardly expressed through a lifestyle, not a physical exercise or action. And so knowing that, when you apply the kanji, Budo, with this particular bu, I'll just stand up so you guys can see it. It's that one there. Because there's different bu kanji. That one particularly, translated the way I learned, is understanding to me the warrior spirit in its highest form. It's understanding the absolute need for harmony, compassion, benevolence, and how that is a higher vibration. It is a higher form of existence. And there's a need for that expression to just keep things in balance. You know, nature does it naturally, and intellectual beings like humans and even monkeys and other smart animals can actually naturally become unbalanced and stray from that. So we need to be a little bit more consciously aware and educated to keep ourselves in that stream. You kind of naturally are growing up, but you can slip out. And anyways, so to be a Budoka is to have that understanding, focus in yourself, and living your life as a warrior, but in that particular stream. So you don't have to be a martial artist. You don't have to be a Japanese martial artist. Budo is a Japanese term. You can be a budoka in a variety of expressions, so long as it coincides with embracing the spirit of the warrior and living your days to that moral standard.
You know, I really love that you said you don't have to be a martial artist. You know, you said that before about the sensei idea. One of the most riveting pieces of art I've ever seen was actually the children of Hiroshima survivors. And they did, the whole dance piece was called Budo walking. And it was them walking across the stage, expressing their lived experience as the children of survivors. And I remember being riveted by it and not knowing how to link the Budo concept. I was already a martial artist at this time. So I really like that you link that. And I really like the way you're generally open to these, you know, maybe you're not doing martial arts, but these concepts can still be for you in this way of living. So let's now get back to you. What was it like growing up for you? And what brought you into that first dojo?
Well, growing up, my early years were, there was a lot of aggression. I was a pretty angry kid. Definitely went through some strong depression, and you know, I had a lot of fights. I mean, I had a lot of fights before I even got angry and depressed, but I always kind of had an edge about me. So I was doomed to get into something, some sort of trouble. If I saw something I didn't agree with, I'd always voice it, whether there was 20 people against me or not. And I would never really consider the outcome or what would happen next. I just knew that I needed to stand up for what I felt was right. And that got me into a lot of trouble. So, you know, a lot of scraps in the schoolyard, on the street, all over the place. And naturally, as I got old enough to finally be able to get into a martial art, because I didn't really have access to one, growing up in the country, unless you had a car and your G2, there was no hope for you. You know what I mean? You were just landlocked. I used to hitchhike for miles. We did all sorts of things. You know, you jump in different cars and get around, but you're still pretty restricted. I couldn't get a routine down where I'd drive an hour and a half somewhere. So I had to wait till I moved out. So I moved out of my house 18 years old. And it just so happened by divine fate that just a few doors down, there was a picture of a samurai, hip throwing a samurai. And I always loved the concepts of soft power. And I tasted it a little bit in my street fighting youth, where, you know, I'd have a bigger guy fight me and I'd somehow work my way into his clinch, get into a headlock or something. This was a typical thing that would happen. And I would learn like a head, hip, and knee throw. I didn't know it was called hip and knee throw. I just knew that it worked really well. And I knew the angles I could feel out, and it felt effortless. And I thought, wow, this guy's strong enough to throw me across the room. I can't pick him up, but I can do this to him. And I can confidently do it over and over again. And there were certain tricks that I had, like every guy who does a lot of fighting, they usually have a trick or two, right? But I knew there was so much more to it. And I was just dying to be a pupil of somebody who could help guide me more. So initially, I kind of got into it maybe for the wrong reasons, because I just wanted to get better at fighting. And, you know, it also helped stabilize me mentally, just getting all that aggression out. The interesting thing is that I never intentionally went to martial arts to be a better person or to find peace. I never did that. I just went there to get beat up and get better at beating up. But an amazing thing happened that completely changed my life forever. And it was just the nature of the environment and the teachers and the mentors and just the support, the camaraderie and compassion that was shared on the floor with the Japanese culture. It was very powerful, and it really crept in. That combined with jiu-jitsu practice, it taught me two things. It taught me how to love and respect myself and love and respect other people. And once that starts happening, the want to fight somebody and actually do damage to them really starts to drop. And before you know it, you just become, you know, a pacifist, you know, like you just absolutely do not want to harm anybody. You see yourself in others, and you'd much rather look to restore harmony and do conflict resolution through a variety of means before it gets physical. So that was sort of, you know, how I got into the martial arts, and that's more or less the process of what led to where I am now.
So
it's fun to hurt people once in a while, though.
Oh, it's so much fun. And I still, you know what? I love being hurt. You know, like Sensei Jack Donovan was amazing. He really took me. You know, I saw this man at the time that I met him. He was in his 60s, and I was like 18, 19 or something like that. I was probably 19 or 20. I might be off a year. And I thought, okay, keep in mind I was young. So I'm looking at him thinking, wow, he's so old. And, how could he do the martial arts, because I know nothing. I'm just a kid. And I was blown away with his power and his grace and his willingness and ability to be able to harm somebody, but choosing not to, but still just enough, right? Like he was great. He would take me and just crush me into the ground, and then he would just pause and kind of stare at me for a moment, just to kind of see what I would do, like what am I going to say? And I loved it. Like, okay, I'm used to being thrown on the concrete, so it's no problem on a mat. I'll just jump right back up. So I jump right back up and I'm like, it's wonderful, Sensei. Thank you. Like I can't wait for someone to do that to me again. And I get to do it too. So yeah, this it was a wonderful experience.
Well, that's something I want to actually touch upon that you talked about. You said to go get beat up and beat up. Most people don't include the first one. And we've talked a lot on our show, and you don't expect not to get roughed up, but the idea that we'd actually want that, talk about that a little bit, because I think that's a bit of our psychology. I mean, I sure don't mind getting hit. I'm not going to get hit, but I don't think anybody gets good if they mind it too much.
Well, Sensei Yamanaka would always say that you don't have to be crazy to do jujitsu, but it helps. And in tongue in cheek, I think that there is something to, if you do enjoy to feel pain, yeah, it's quite helpful. I don't think it's necessarily unhealthy. I mean, who knows? I come from, a troubled mind as a youth, so there's probably some irreparable damage in there somewhere. But it's not that I don't care for myself. I care for myself. I have respect for myself. But I enjoy it. Yeah, I enjoy feeling pain. Absolutely. Yeah, I always have. So. And martial arts is a good fit for me on that note.
Mm-hmm. And then there's something else you said that, again, we've touched on, so I don't think we'll totally go around the horn on it, but the idea that you do this thing where you're going to hurt and get hurt, but somehow then that makes you love and surrender to a bigger part of humanity and not want to go do that. And find like a community. You went to do this one thing and you ended up finding this whole other thing. How does that happen with technically a violent art?
I think it's the way it's expressed. So I don't think every club would necessarily offer that in their classes. It's something that my senseis never spoke to. It was never a conversation, or no attention was brought to it. But the fact was, there was respect given. There was rules in the dojo. It was a sacred space. You don't just tromp around and walk in there. You don't, you show up, clean, put together. You pay your respect to your seniors. You get change. You show up on time. And sensei says jump, you jump. If you're not successful in what you do, then you just keep trying. And having a leader do that has a heart of a compassionate heart, you can feel that from them. You can see that grace. It affects the floor. I spent many years training under Yamanaka Sensei and Smith Sensei, and Yamanaka Sensei would often give you food for thought, and he would say things at end of class or during class or at different times, like, philosophical concepts that really make you ponder things. Smith Sensei would ask us certain questions as well, and there would be literature to read. So it's all in an effort to just open up your mind and to question things. And as I started to peel back the layers as to why I felt the way I felt and where that came from, and understanding a little more of like who I was, it just naturally came to that conclusion, And I don't think it's a one-off, because I've seen it happen to many students that went through that dojo when I was a student of my sensei's dojo, and I continue to see it in mine as I teach students. So I really think it's how you do it, not necessarily what you're doing.
I do think this is around the horn, because it's especially Sensei Suino. I really see you connecting with this idea and nodding, the idea that you go there to learn to beat people up, and all of a sudden you just find a world that you either wish you could share, or it prevents you from sharing the violent aspects day to day. What is that?
Yeah, I mean, it's all the cultural stuff, the cultural trappings, learning to bow and using the word sensei and everything else. The expectation is you're going to behave a certain way. But I think there's something to the fact that no matter how much of a badass you think you are, when you get into a good dojo, there's always other people that are more of a badass than you are, right? They've been down the road longer, and you know, you only act out until you can't act out anymore. And right, if there's a powerful figure in the room who can shut you down, you know, either they shut you down physically because you're too thick-headed to realize it, or you just feel it and you know, and then you find your place, whether it's because of your belt color or your time in rank, or because other people can, you know, kick your ass. But man, it's like magic. It, you know, some people quit, but everybody who stays figures it out. Right?
Yep.
Yeah.
I'm phrase it just a little differently for you, Hanshi Legacy and Sensei Dauphin, just because I don't know if we've ever talked about this, but I think of myself as going to karate to learn like how to fight. But I've actually thought about you two as people who've benefited from learning not like how not to fight. Like karate gave you another option. Would that be accurate? And in either case, Hanshi Legacy, we'll start with you. What is it about this martial art that people go to learn how to fight and then they end up finding peace, calm, and wanting to spread that?
Everybody goes in with their own idea of martial arts, right? But again, I'm going to agree with Sensei Ryan that really it's to find a way of living life in peace, but you also have to be able to defend that way that you understand life. You know, it's like, for instance, the original basic movements of martial arts were invented by Buddha, because the monks were all, you ever see a monk sitting there who wasn't round and fat from just sitting there? Well, he thought they can't sit there long enough to do the proper meditation. So he made up these basics that were later passed on to become martial arts way down the road. But the thing again is that even a peaceful life has to be defended. Whether it's for yourself or just, you go back in the Bible, and just came into my mind when Gabriel cut this guy's ear off. I mean, he was there defending Jesus Christ. But there's still always that somebody has to come up with that final decision to do something. And I think that's more in the life of the martial artist, that proper way of living. You don't just bring it out because some guy, you know, dirtied your floor or something.
Sensei Dauphin, where do you go with that idea?
Well, I want to backtrack a little bit, Sean. So one of our rules in Legacy Shorin-ryu is like, if you get in an altercation outside of the dojo, you must tell your teacher, under pain of expulsion from the dojo for life. That was communicated to me like in my first few weeks by Sensei Legacy, who is like, as Sensei Suino said, an authoritative person who's going to put you in your place, period. I love this so much. It was like, okay, I don't really understand that statement, but I'm not going to get in a damn fight. And if I do, I'm going to go tell him, because I really want to be able to fight and beat people up, right? Like it's like, I really want to beat people up. But now there's this rule where I can't do it. I have to go and tell him if I do. And if I do it incorrectly, I'm going to get kicked out of karate forever. So the construct and the people that enforce the construct, I think, helps you come through that. I mean, and I guess to answer your question specifically, I'm going to quote Sensei Legacy, and I'm going to give you an analogy. If you work at a cookie factory all day, you probably don't go home and eat cookies. Right?
I get it.
I like that.
You come to the dojo, you fight all these people. Some are tougher, some are not. When you leave the dojo, you don't have that feeling of, I need to go prove myself and beat up some stranger, because you've already proven yourself to yourself in the dojo, and you already know where you're weak and where you're strong. So yeah, that's my answer to your question.
Thanks, Sensei. Is my video paused for y'all? It is for me.
video.
Yes, sir.
I'm going to stop it and restart it, but let's see if you hear my voice.
We hear your voice fine. Yeah, there you are.
So Sensei Bodrug, let's go back to you and let's go back to your time as a young man starting these arts. Like, who do you remember around there? What were those early experiences like? And what was the moment where you said, yeah, I'm never not doing this?
Oh, I think that moment came early. It would have been in Sensei Donovan's dojo, which at the time, he had just a bunch of adults that were we would get together in this like cold basement that lay out the mats and this and that. And I mean, everybody was like twice my age. Well, one guy he was maybe 15 years older than me or whatever, but most people were twice my age. So for me, I was pretty intimidated and impressed by, being around these senior men that I never had a chance to really expose myself to be around mentors and people like that. And just, the way we would train, it was effective, real, but with care. There was always compassion there. As much as you would work the technique that could do damage, you would hold back just enough so you wouldn't do too much. We'd still hit each other, and the throws were 100% throws, and I just fell in love with it, and wasn't used to having a adult that gave me that respect and were that kind to me. So that really took me. When I moved back to Toronto area, and I was hooked. I used to practice on my own anyways, and after doing martial arts consistently with Sensei Donovan, there's no way I didn't want to continue. I was going to continue, and I thought, well, I'm about 2 hours away from my sensei, that'd be Sensei Yamanaka, and I thought, well, if I work in the city, maybe I'm only an hour. It all depends on the day and what job I get. But I was living out of town. And I thought, well, okay, I don't have any money. I'm an apprentice. I can barely afford my car, but I'm just going to show up and give it a shot because, what's he going to say? He's going to say no. And then I can say I tried, but I don't want to live with regret. So I asked permission to learn from him in his dojo. And I remember pulling me into the office and sitting me down and, he could ask me some questions and I could see he was analyzing me. I just flat out, there's no way I was going to be able to afford his dojo. It was the world headquarters of the YKKF at the time. People are traveling around the world. They'd stay at the dojo, learn from him, leave. It was a big thing. And, anyways, so with the gracious heart he had, he let me come in at a reduced rate and would make up the difference through maintaining the dojo, doing electrical work there and things like that. And I'm so forever grateful that he did that because that really changed my life in a huge way. I mean, it was already on that trajectory, but it really pushed it to a new level. Being able to be with Yamanaka Sensei in his hombu and having all the surrounding talented individuals there was just phenomenal because he had it wasn't just like one Shihan to the dojo. Some dojos don't even have a Shihan. Yamanaka's dojo was like, there was so many teachers that easily could stand alone on their own and have hundreds of students. They were so talented. So there was a massive gap between, I found between the students and the knowledge that was out there from the seniors. It was just an endless thing to get hooked on. You could just never learn enough. It got to the point where I had the key and I was there 6 days a week and I only didn't show up on Sunday because I was driving so much. I just needed a day to rest, but literally 6 days a week and I'd lock up the dojo every night and I loved it. I didn't care if I was the last one there after a huge class and nobody did soji because some people forget their etiquette. I don't care. I'd get down, I'd get the rag and I'd run it across the floor just like he taught me, and to me, it was just like the whole process from entering the dojo to leaving, everything in between was like a form of walking meditation. It extended beyond the class. And there was just so much there to unpack that I could never ever stop.
Just real quick, do you want to restart your video perhaps as well? I know for me that just was all paused, but your voice came through so clearly.
It did, eh?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry about that.
Not at all. It's we're all dealing with this, and it's the 100th time. We'll just wait for him to pop right back, but I want to talk about something we're all pretty familiar with, traveling to meet your sensei.
Hopefully my mouth wasn't opened or something weird. for that paused video.
So how old were you during this period? And I did just miss, where were you driving from and to?
At the time, I moved back to Caledon area. So I was living in Caledon and I would drive to Markham.
Right on.
And to get there for 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, 5 o'clock, it was 2 hours, easy 2 hours. Yeah. And my job would work all over the place. So I'd be lucky if I was half an hour away, but typically I wouldn't be. I'd be west side of Toronto or outside of the city or whatever it is. So yeah, it was a sacrifice, like you learn all the places in the different parts of the city where they have a clean washroom where you can get changed and do like a sink bath, you learn the laundromats where you can do a quick wash of your gi. You find the places where you can eat and have a nap. Like I lived on the road to make that work. I never understood the students that would live 2 minutes away and they would never show, in my mind, proper respect to my sensei. And they were the first to stop coming when, the dojo was starting to close down. I'm thinking, you guys have no idea what you're missing. Like I would sacrifice more if I needed to show up here. But there's something to be said about that. But yeah, that's what it was for me for many years.
So
I'm sorry, could I ask something here? At that time, Yamanaka Sensei's dojo, where it was located north of the 401, was it?
Yes, it was. Yeah.
Yeah. What is that location?
Yeah, steel case, I think, wasn't it? Oh man, so long ago. It was Woodbine and Steels. It was like the northeast section of Woodbine and Steels. I think it was Steel Case Road or something. Geez, a long time ago.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
It's the same. Right? I trained there a few times with other guys with him.
Oh wow.
I think you graded your 5th Dan there, didn't you, Sensei, in that dojo?
Yeah, with Varesta Sensei. I think it was Varesta. Yeah. So he's Yamanaka Sensei is well known by many persons. Sorry, just want to stick that in.
Doing here. Sensei Bodrug, I just wanted to ask you about that traveling, and we will go around the horn on this one too. Like, that was quite a sacrifice. How important was that when you look back on the martial artist it made you? And how important is it, maybe not travel, but for there to be some level of sacrifice when maybe especially in the early times?
I think there's a natural process to this where generally things in life that are worth fighting for, you have to fight for. It just works out that way in a lot of cases. And I think they're healthy dynamics for the most part. There's value to it. I mean, you never question yourself because, you could ask that question every time you decide to start that journey, but then the answer comes quickly. It was funny because I would laugh about it. I try to explain it to people and I wouldn't expect them to understand. But, I would put it like this, like if someone's saying they're having a hard time coming to the dojo, I'd listen to them and I would be compassionate to them. And sure, I understand. It's a long drive for you or this or that, whatever. I said, and I can give you 10 more reasons not to come if you want, but there's only one reason to come. And that one reason to come has to be stronger than those endless number of reasons why you don't come. And so I think that's a personal conversation for everybody. And there's no wrong answer. I definitely don't judge those that chose not to make such a sacrifice because everybody has their own unique life experience. You can't compare yourself to others, but there just there's an interesting law there, isn't there? When it comes to finding something sacred and naturally starting to do it, whatever it is, there's going to be roadblocks. There's going to be challenges, and I had mine, but so what? My senseis had to travel to the States, Japan, all these different places, way further than I did for their teachers. So what do I have to complain about? I sacrifice 2-hour drive one way, usually a 1-hour drive home. So 3 hours, So can I afford the gas? Yes. Can I make it work? Yes. Okay. So there's nothing to talk about here. I'm going to be on time.
Right on. Sensei Dauphin, traveling to find your sensei, tell us about your experiences and how important that sacrifice might be.
I've paid as much in gas as I have in dues. Right. I left London and Sensei Legacy teaches in London, St. Thomas. I left there when I was a brown belt. And I drove back 3 times a week from Kitchener to London, 3 times a week. I was never late for class. As a matter of fact, I was probably usually one of the first people there waiting to get into class. I'm getting up tomorrow at 6 o'clock in the morning and getting in the car, and I'm driving to Ann Arbor, Michigan, because we have some students that Sensei Suino is going to test. And I want to be there way on time. The test is at 5. I don't care. I'm getting there as early as I possibly can. I don't know what's going to happen at the border. Don't know what, but I want as much time as possible to get there so that I'm on time. I'm not late. I'm dressed. I can get my mind right. Yeah, everybody on this call has flown to Okinawa, flown to Japan, traveled to different places. And I will say that I think you get something from that. That's one thing I want to say is you get something from that. That travel time, you get something from it. I'm not going alone tomorrow morning. I'm going to have my wife and I'm going to have my daughter with me, and we're going to have some quality time. We're going to talk about martial arts. The phone won't be ringing. When you leave the dojo and you got to drive for 2 hours to get home, that gives you a lot of time to think about your last lesson, where you failed, where you need to do better the next time. There's uninterrupted. And then, Sean, you and I have driven so many times, so many cool adventures on the highway, like car crashes where we're given first aid, crapping your pants because you ate something bad the day before. Sensei Legacy and I have driven all to Kentucky, to North Carolina, to Minnesota, and that's the impetus of this show, right? Is being in the back seat, traveling along, learn about martial arts. I wouldn't trade any moment in the car with a martial artist getting to a place where you were going to do the thing you love. I wouldn't trade any second. You're just extending the dojo time through the travel time. I love it. Yeah.
And being the guy who drives mostly, I sometimes miss being the purple belt in the back. You know, you're just listening going, I don't even know what all these names are, but I'm just listening. It's beautiful. Sensei Suino, you've traveled a lot to learn as much as anybody on this call. How important is that sacrifice?
It's so funny. While everybody was talking about it, I see kind of the same thing. There's some things when you become passionate about them, none of those obstacles were anything, right? They just were nothing. Yeah, I after grad school, I got off my career path and I moved to Tokyo for 4.5 years. And then, every day in Tokyo, I'm on the train for an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours, going to train with my teachers. It was never an obstacle. It was never a thing. It was never a thing. I never dragged myself out of bed to go do that. On the other hand, if you had, when I was in college, it's like some days I really didn't feel like going to class. Maybe I cut class now and then. Maybe I dragged my ass to school. It was a completely different thing. So it's interesting to say, right, that we made sacrifices. If it was never of course it was, right? You can balance. You can say, if you had only done, if I had not left my career path and stayed in it, maybe I'd be richer today or something like that in terms of money. But it was never a sacrifice. I don't even look at a minute that I spent on my way to martial arts, whether it was to my own dojo or to a teacher's dojo, ever as a sacrifice. It's just what you do.
Sensei Suino, how was the drive to Lévis, Quebec and back?
That was fucking great, man. We got so much talking done. It was unbelievable. And I got to know Shaggy so well. I discovered one of the coolest martial artists I know, lives in the house with Randy, and is very quiet. She knits sweaters, and she has the best sense of humor of any teenage person I've ever met in my life. Yeah. So, that too, right? What was that drive? 14 hours? I don't remember. For me? Yeah. 14 hours for me. Nothing. Yeah.
Hanshi Legacy, you've traveled all across this world for your martial arts. Would it have been better if it was right next door?
The only way I would say no would be because that's what it took for me to find someone. Right. If he was next door, then it would have been better for me. But I did search out a sensei, and I did it deliberately. It took me basically 10 years to find my next sensei after my one sensei had passed away, looking for Anthony Sandoval. A lot of people wore the costume, but you wore this. Remember, we talked about this before. A lot of persons wore the Batman mask or suit, but they weren't Spider-Man. When I saw this guy, he didn't act anything. He was just himself. You asked him something, he just showed it to you. You asked him questions, he just answered you. Where I've had guys with big names, I asked them to see something, they couldn't do it. Or we even went to just between all of us and everybody out there. I even went to Okinawa one time, and I won't mention anybody's name, but I told them I was looking for the secretive white crane, and he said, "Oh, that is no style. Nobody knows that." He says, "We'll do kata." So I said, "Okay." I said, "Randy, go out there." I whispered to him, "And do Hakatsura Dai. That is the black belt, white crane kata." And I was standing behind him, and his shoulders went, "Oh, geez, like I got caught." Not being quite truthful, you know. So you ran into persons like that, but Sensei Sandoval was. So what I've got written there is seek out a sensei. It's a lifetime relationship until one of you dies. That's why you call him sensei.
Right on.
Center, or why you call him dad. That's why.
Yeah, very well put.
We're almost at that wonderful 9:30 my time, 7:30 moment, but I just want to put a little button on that for myself. For me, what that travel time did, and what having to, my first 3 years were at Western with you, Hanshi Legacy, and that made it easy. I've never lived within an hour to an hour and a half of my sensei since, and it made it mine. As long as it was right next door, it was just something I was doing because I could and it was easy. And that's not really true. I fell in love with martial arts night one, but the travel made it mine. It made it something that no one else I didn't with Toronto was coming with me to Cambridge. And it very quickly, the sacrifice wasn't a sacrifice, like you said, Sensei Suino, but this was my journey. And it very quickly made it my path. And I love that. And then you wake up one day and you're like, oh, I'm walking it with all these other, in our case, Legacy Shorin-ryu people right beside me. They just don't happen to be driving that exact stretch of highway to get to class. But yeah, that sense of ownership, like this is something I do, whether anyone else does it or not. It was important for me.
Sean, I want to say that I think the harder it is to achieve, the more you value it when you can. Even if you bring it to a technique, right? Like there's probably a technique that all of us struggled with that we wanted to be able to do. And then when you could do it, you value that technique through the effort more than any other. You're like, I love that one. Like that's the one for me, right? And that drive and that struggle makes it more worthwhile, I think.
Yep. There's an idea in math of first principles. Like there's the formula that you use, and there's the first principles, which is why the formula works that way. And those moves that are tougher for me, I had to go to first principles, and then it informed all the other moves that seemed easier and maybe weren't that great because they were too easy. And that obviously expands beyond just Sensei Bodrug, it's 9:31, 7:31. Time for your 10 questions. We ask all our guests these. We ask that you answer as impulsively as you can, but then feel free to flesh out your answer as you wish. What is the most effective move in your martial arts arsenal?
Understanding yourself. It's a concept. It goes beyond move. I think that's the most effective thing. If you understand yourself, then you can be measured and controlled and understood in any circumstance, and that is really going to help control the outcome more than anything else. If the best move has to be something effective, then I'm going to say that.
Pausing to make a note of this. because I want to come back to this and I don't have pen and paper right now. Who's the most influential martial artist in your life?
Well, that's a tough question. I can't really put that to one person. And definitely, the major influences would be Smith Sensei and Yamanaka Sensei for sure. They, Yamanaka Sensei, I love him like a father, and I was blessed to have Smith Sensei, and who very much felt like a father. In my mind, was a father to me while he was alive. So I would say those two gentlemen were the most influential.
Right. Who do you think is the most influential martial artist of all time, and why?
Yeah, that's a tough one too. Maybe Chikuro Kano, because of the I don't think people realize how much his influence has perforated around the world. It goes far beyond judo. Ranking systems, unifying all the Japanese jiu-jitsu schools in Japan and helping to keep it alive. I mean, not only that, he had a really good expression of Japanese jiu-jitsu. I would say that.
Right on. There's no right or wrong answers, but that was my answer. What excites you most about the next 5 years of your training?
Just getting deeper into it. It's the same formula, just kind of rinse and repeat. You're always looking to kind of have purges and find your ceiling, and you want to break through the ceiling. You don't always know where the ceiling is. It's an adventure. As we sort of progress through things, you're always looking to broaden your horizons and get into a new skin that has a broader awareness. It's transformative, right? So you never know when the next one's going to happen, and you always work towards it.
If heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you get there?
I have no expectations. I think God can say whatever he needs to say. It's his show. I would just look at him and say, I just shut up and listen.
Right. Do you have a favorite film and television martial artist, whether they do martial arts or not? They might be an action hero or an actual martial artist.
Jackie Chan. For sure. Gotta love him. Yeah. And some of his movies really articulate the rhythm of fighting really well. And other ones are really good at just showing the versatility of martial arts and all its different avenues. And his sense of care and benevolence and anti-violence that he fits into his fighting with his humor, it's amazing. It's just, yeah.
What martial artist, living or dead, in all of recorded history would you want to train with the most?
I would just continue training with Sensei Smith, who's still alive. And of course, Sensei Yamanaka, I still train with him.
I said that. That's the same thing I said. Not your senses. I said I just keep training with my senses.
Yeah.
If everyone in the world could have the greatest benefit you've gotten from martial arts, whether they train or not, what benefit would they be getting?
The greatest benefit I think you can get from martial arts is self-discovery and appreciation. Because I think that snowballs into much broader things, and hopefully leads you to see yourself in others. That's a very powerful and important principle, I think, that can diffuse a lot. Why is there so much war and destructive action taken across the board between other human beings? When you do something like that, when you try to harm somebody, you don't see yourself in them. You may not even see them as another human being. You dehumanize them in a lot of ways to do vicious acts, and I think that's the most dangerous thing that we could possibly do. I also think it's wrong in the sense that it's not true. But being as powerful as we are as intellectual beings, we have the ability to have our consciousness sit in many ways that give us different perspectives. I'm always going to support the perspective that's going to allow for us to flourish and work in harmony with the earth.
Our last two questions come as a pair. What's your greatest achievement and what is your greatest regret?
My greatest achievement is I'm still alive and we're still going to keep living. You know, I think every birthday you need to have a moment to yourself and pay respect to that. You never know when things are going to happen. That's tangible to me because my upbringing from 2 years old to 6 was really dicey. I spent a lot of time in the hospital. I almost died multiple times, and it became really apparent really early on to me how easy life can be taken from you. You know, I remember, it's funny how you have odd memories, right? So it might be hard for people to believe this, I understand, but I have a memory of being less than 6 because I know the driveway I was on, and coming out of the car after a bout of hospital, probably had an overnight or something like that there, and I was coming home, and I remember standing out of the car at the end of the driveway, looking up to the sky, and just really appreciating that moment, just to be able to feel the sun on my face, see a blue sky, and smell the fresh air. And you know, I remember saying to myself that you know, I want to experience as much of this as I can. And you know, when you're not, I find, like, I think other children would probably relate to this, but like when you're really young and you're going through things that that might take your life, you're not too spooked by it. I think you get more freaked out maybe as an adult because you understand more. But you know, I understood that my life could end, and it wasn't guaranteed, and that anybody's life could end. People die, and we don't really know where they go to heaven. But it doesn't really, it's not like a, you know, it's just a thing. It's like you also have lunch and it's time to go to bed. You know, these are things that happen. And, you know, sometimes it's a bit scary to think about what might be, but as a kid, you're pretty content with the idea of die, go to heaven. So that's always been in my mind. I don't think I've ever lost touch with my mortality. And so I think getting people to connect with their mortality is a very powerful thing.
And greatest regret?
I really try hard not to live with regrets. I don't know that I have any right now. You know, some things aren't going perfectly in my life for sure, and I have to work through that. You know, the first part of that is just not having a regret and learning to forgive. I don't know that I have regrets. I mean, I've made mistakes. I've definitely tried things and they failed. That continues to happen along with my successes. But at this moment, I honestly can't think of a regret.
Well, thanks for those 10 questions. I want to come back to something you talked about that I want to break open for us all and chat about, which is just this idea you've touched upon a few times of understanding yourself, you know, of self-discovery, of you know, that being the most important technique. Hanshi Legacy, I really saw you connecting with that idea, and you've talked about this. Do you buy that? Do you want to add anything to that?
I'm sorry, I missed the initial.
Well, he brought it up as a result of the idea of that being the most effective technique is knowing yourself. But then later again, just talked about the idea of self-discovery being the greatest benefit of this art, and being able to connect with who you really are.
No, I accept that. I agree with that totally. It's a way of life and a way of looking at life. The physical part of martial arts, really looking back at its onset, was to allow you to live the life you choose, you know, and usually those are people that are being dominated or bullied, we'll say, in a more modern day. Or back in those days, the guy would take your land and he would kill you, or if you held your arm up, he'd cut your arm off, you know. So I believe it was a necessity in those days, but they still wanted to live that peaceful life. So somebody had to stand up for that peaceful life. So maybe martial arts is a lot like our real armies, where they train in peace times. Right now, the armies are training in peacetime. So that should that ever arise, somebody's trying to take our democracy away from us, well, then we have to go and defend that right. So somebody has to be able to do that because of the world that we live in. You know, when the water's soft, go swimming, and when the water's hard, go skating. That's all I could say.
Thanks for that, Hachi.
Okay.
Sensei Dolphin, self-discovery, how does the martial arts make that a thing? And how important is that for a martial artist?
I think it's really important. I think you probably can get it from other things, but because of the consequence of martial arts failure, when you fail in martial arts, there's usually a higher level of consequence to that failure, which forces you to grow with it because you don't want that same consequence over and over again. As much as Kyoshi and I and everybody on this call enjoy pain and enjoy, you still, that consequence pushes you in a different direction. And it's, at least for me, I learned way more from the things that I failed at, learned way more about myself. I came in at 18 and thought, oh man, I'm tough. I'm good. I'm like, only to learn like you're not at all. Like everything you thought about yourself is an illusion that you painted in your own brain and you were living some fantasy that doesn't exist. Right. Like, so yeah, I guess what I would say is in martial arts, the failures help you to grow because the failures have more consequence than other things. Right. Those consequences are physical, spiritual, mental. They push you on a lot of different directions. My take.
Thanks. Sensei Suino, where do you want to go with this idea of self-discovery through the arts and its importance, or anywhere you want to go with that?
Yeah, well, I mean, everything folks have said up till now, I agree with. But nobody's really mentioned the fact that in our martial arts culture, there's a lot of help to put yourself in that mindset, right? It's not just, oh, do martial arts and you're going to get better, or not just you're going to do martial arts and become a better human being. We also talk about it all the time. We talk about self-discovery, talk about enlightenment. We actively encourage our students to take the lessons from the dojo and apply them in life. So there's a whole culture around it too. Now, maybe people that get really good at playing bridge or, making new engines at the automotive company, have a similar self-improvement curve. I don't think they do, but if they do, I don't think they spend a lot of time talking about how that's going to lead them to a better life, right? Or how to help make the world a better place. So in addition to the very simple fact that there's something inherent in the activity of martial arts that makes us better people, I think there's also a lot of culture around it that helps learn those lessons.
One thing I want to add too is, the idea of humility, because there's that idea that we learn what we're not that great at and we pay the consequence. But I learned somewhere along the line that humility is being right-sized, not being small, because sometimes we are good at something. And that's the other aspect of it. Like when you learn, oh, I am decent at this, doesn't mean I'm the best, or doesn't mean it's always going to work. But I think that's really important too, to know ourselves, that the extremity of our capabilities, and then to go, great, like, okay, I'm not that great at this. My inside middle block sucks, but this other stuff's working. And then we can within ourselves model, okay, if this is working, I can bring this up to that level by doing what this. So it's a really cool thing that, being too far, oh, I'm not great at that, to me is the same ego as, oh, I'm so great at it. I'm good at what I'm good at. I'm not good at what I'm not good at. And I love the idea that that gets learned too. Sensei Bodrug, I also want to talk about your idea of rinse and repeat. I think this is a huge idea. You just said you just rinse and repeat, like you're doing the same stuff. Rinse, repeat. If you break that open a little for us, and then I want to go around the horn on that idea too, because I think it's really important. Like a lot of people are looking for the big secret at the end of the rainbow, but you're talking about something way more prosaic.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to rinse, repeat, I think if you don't create a structure that has some sort of regular routine to it, you can't allow yourself to grow. We always say these terms, they sound maybe cliche, but we're organic beings. We're not robotic. You can't download a program in me and then I just got it. We have to discover and blossom. And that only happens through consistency. And that consistency can come in forms of pressure, demand to progress. Human beings are naturally lazy creatures. If we don't have to do anything, we won't, And so the need for routine, no matter how slight, can absolutely accumulate its own little momentum and build over time. So it's vital. I say to my students, I only teach adults and they all have careers and they have fluctuating schedules and they can't always make it to the dojo. And I say, just come when you can. I don't care if you come at the end of class. We usually stay for an extra 2 hours past. So, there's always time for you. Even if you just come once a week or even just once a month, something, try to commit yourself to something and then work from there. I think there's still benefit to be found, even at small increments, versus having just a randomization of having an impulse, willingness, and then acting on that urge and then falling out of it because the urge doesn't last forever and then not showing up. That's never going to help you grow. Some structural discipline is needed.
Yeah, I like that word you used, randomization. Like, I live a pretty random life sometimes. I get calls out of the blue and I fly halfway across the country. And those routines are more important than ever in the middle of the randomization, even if it's just in my hotel room. Sensei Suino, rinse and repeat. Where does that fit into your path of martial arts?
My routine is so important. One of the big things we spend decades doing is figuring out which routines help us and which don't, right? And then doubling down on them, making them more efficient. Randy and I spend a lot of time talking about scaffolded skills, whether that means building your martial arts up or building your fitness up. There are things that, that people on this call can do that other people can't do. Physical skills or application of force that quote unquote normal people can't do, and normal people can't do them tomorrow, right? You can't show it to them and go, okay, that's fine, I got this, right? It's scaffolding, and that rinse and repeat is like I've heard it described as an upward spiral, right? You have to come back and work on the basics again and again, but hopefully each time you do, you're gonna be a little bit better at them, and then at some point, not that there's magic, but it looks like magic to people that haven't been on that journey with you.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Sensei Dolfam, I know you're nodding along with any concept of rinse and repeat. Where do you go with that?
I don't know if you're talking about my 15 martial arts uniforms, and I don't ever rinse and repeat, because I'm lucky enough that my wife, Christine, rinses and repeats for me so that I can get in here and rinse and repeat again, over and over again. Yeah, I don't know. When people who they know me, you know somebody really well. And like, let's say Nick McLaren, one of my best friends on the planet, right? And I've known him since I was 18 years old. And we talk, at least once a month, but probably once a week. Hey, what are you doing? My answer is always the same. Nick, tell me what my day looked like, starting at 8 a.m. And he could hour by hour say what he knows. He's living that life too. So he knows what rinse and repeat is. He's like, you got up, you had some coffee, you went to the dojo, you worked out, you had a shower, you went and did your job. When your job was done, you went back to the dojo, you worked out by yourself, you taught 2 classes, you went home, you hung out with your family, you had a shower, you ate some food, you went to sleep, you got up the next morning, you did the same thing. And through that construct, each day is actually uniquely different. As much as it's the same, it's actually uniquely different every day, right? Sensei Legacy says it all the time. It's a stew. Well, you can eat stew every day. The recipe is always slightly different. There's a little more salt one time. There's an extra piece of potato it's a bad analogy, but it's true, right? Like, it's not the same meal over and over again. It's the same meal, slightly different all the time. I don't know. That's where I take it.
Awesome. Hanshi Legacy, rinse and repeat. What does that do for a martial artist?
Well, in my opinion is that everyone has to rediscover, we said this before, everyone has to rediscover martial arts for themselves. And that's how you do it, it's by doing it over and over and over until you experience it. Not hearing your sensei say, well, if you do this, you can do that. But you have to actually go out there and do it. And the lessons come out on the amount of work that you do, or the amount of meditations that you do, so that you can experience on all different levels, right? So you don't always get it the first couple of times. Sometimes it takes you 10 years to finally you're standing there and you do something and you stand up and you go, all right, I get that, because I just felt that, and, you know, you're enlightened to that technique. And so you have to do it so many times. Like you said, it's slightly different each time until you learn that lesson. Martial arts is not going to let their secrets go to somebody who just shows up. He can show up every day, but never works out. That person won't get enlightened. Not through the martial arts.
Right on. Just real quick button for me, you know, I was talking to Sensei Dauphin about this. I'm working on a TV show and I do have to be really careful about my face. It's a beautiful job. I don't want to compromise, and I can't compromise my look. Even a black eye would be a real problem for the production. So I'm not going to do any sparring, any rolling, anything. And my thought when I made that decision was, this is going to be fucking great. I can just work my basics all summer. There's a little piece of wood down in my gym. And I was like, awesome. Because I feel like my basics can use some work right now. And the idea that I'm just going to be training basics like 5 days a week and then some supplementary weights and kata the other days, it's really exciting for me. Like the rinse and repeat. And I can't wait to see on the other side of a summer of just that.
Well, listen, Sean, whatever you do, don't practice that foot sweep you always nail me with when we spar, please.
If you come here, I'm going to punch you in the eye right away. Even before we start training, I'm just going to punch you in the eye.
Yeah, September 8th. September 8th. You do anything you want. Sensei Bodrug, we're going to have time for one more question, but it's on this rinse and repeat idea, because there's a word that's come up and it's on your website, and I think it's an amazing word, and I know Sensei Suino's going to dig it. Biomechanics. You know, we use the word technique a lot, and we all kind of know what we mean, but talk more specifically about biomechanics and why that's so fundamental to a martial art.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, we're talking about kinesiology. We're talking about actual principles of how the human body moves effectively, which sometimes, you know, doesn't always fit into martial arts. You know, there's a lot of martial arts that have had many generations of expressing an art form without pressure testing. And there's a lot of room in there for people to lose the knowledge of the right mechanic. It's not to say that the technique is necessarily wrong, but it could be performed incorrectly. And so how a technique is done with your body, maybe it doesn't look very different, but it can feel very different if done correctly. If you get the bone alignment right, if you get the fluid pressure correct and the momentum with it, the tension levels at the right point. So yeah, biomechanical correctness is huge. You know, we've talked a lot of concepts tonight and different principles that would extend to many different realms of martial arts, because any decent art can use the principles of Budo and all these things as a vehicle to help people. It just happens that in our school, I really like the combat side. I really enjoy the fight. I want my students to learn real fighting principles, but I also want them to understand how far they can push their bodies, how much they can grow, you know, and that goes beyond fighting, and it's unnecessary. You don't need to get into really deep levels of sensitivity and finite movement to be a good fighter. But if you want to talk about increasing your full potential as a human being and really learning to use your body, hone your spirit and mind in one moment, now that's a real beautiful polished craft that extends beyond the fight. I enjoy all of those elements, but putting them into a practical combative scenario. So the biomechanical correctness needs to be there for that.
Right on. Sensei Suino, I mentioned that for you because these words, biomechanical structure, especially, you know, talk to us about what that means for you, especially with those throwing arts.
Yeah, I mean, I believe that there's an optimal way for everybody to move, right? Based on your skeleton, the way your connective tissue is, your fast twitch and slow twitch fibers, your muscle bulk, the way you cognitize movements. And, you know, we practice the martial art the way it's taught to us, but if we do it long enough, we can also study all those aspects of ourselves and bring them to the art, make ourselves more efficient, make ourselves faster. And that's again, kind of magic to me. I've told you before, there's been times in my life where I've taken the dogma of 35, 40 years of martial arts training, thrown it out the window for a year and just experimented and going, what's really right? what really works, at least for me in this setting at this time. And then I come back to the dogma and I go, you know what, 95% of that stuff was great, but there's 5% that upon really careful inquiry, it wasn't as efficient or strong or effective as it should be. And so, you know, then I put it aside. But I love where this conversation's going. I hope we can get back into this at some point in the future.
Right on. Might be a short for us. Hanshi Legacy, you know, I don't even think I've ever said this to you, but very early on, I mean, my first or second month in karate at Western in 1993, you started talking about kinesiology so specifically. And I was like, oh, I'm doing like ancient Chinese secret combined with fully modern
Yeah.
the body. And it was really attractive to me. Talk about biomechanics as you think about it.
It's a way of bettering your techniques, and Sensei Ryan covered most of it, but looking at it and on short term here is it improves your timing and the way you deliver your techniques. Sometimes you may not have to write, like the summation of joint forces, for instance. You want it to run a certain way. When Randy or yourself, when we're together and you throw a punch, a lot of the times I'm just waiting for that sound. Whap, when it comes running down your arm, right? Or it hasn't come from your hips. You're just hitting the person with your hand instead of your entire being. And, you know, in those mechanics, you need that mass over duration of the distance. So all that combines together to make your techniques better, your delivery better on the physical level, in my opinion.
Thanks, Hanshi. Sensei Dauphin?
I often tell the students in here, form is the best vehicle to develop your power and then be able to deliver it, right? That's why you do it that way, right? Because it's like, if you think of a garden hose, it's like, no, the best way to get the water to come out is line it up, make it nice and straight, and then it flows out. If there's a bunch of kinks and knots, then it won't come out right. So I think in the beginning, you know, that's what the techniques are for. But I will say something. I think when you learn the rules and you apply the rules for a long amount of time, then you can learn how to break the rules a little bit too, right? You can learn how to come out of that and only use a portion of the technique and still get more power, or, you know, it doesn't have to always be that strict form anymore. I just remember Sensei Legacy saying that in the beginning. And I want to say, I once said to Sensei Legacy, you're the most unconventional fighter I've ever fought. I've never fought somebody as unconventional as you. And at first he wasn't, and what I meant by that was, you just seem to have the ability to be able to hit me from any position with any kind of weird technique and still generate force and power that results in me getting hurt, right? Or stopping me from attacking you. But if you watch Sensei Legacy do his basics, his classical basics, they are like the best basics on the face of the earth. The vehicle to deliver that power is incredible, right? So I don't know, I guess I'm just rambling a bit right now, but yeah, so I'll go back. The basics are the best way for you to be able to develop your power and then deliver that power. And then once you can do that, you can start to kind of, like in the Matrix, you can change the rules a little bit for yourself, but you got to learn it first before you can start changing the rules.
Right on. And again, for my little button, there's like this big feeling of like, I'm doing karate, I'm a white belt, I'm a yellow belt, but there's this little point that has to be like, you're doing it the way you think it should feel. And then enough practice of the biomechanics, it's like, oh, this is how it actually feels. And then out from that can come that desire to feel big about it again. And I really like that, like always coming back to, no, this is how it does feel. Karate changes you, you don't change it, that kind of idea. And I personally found that, and I'm continuing to find it through biomechanics. Sensei Bodrug, fucking time is real, and we hate it around here. And Sensei Suino's even hating me right now because it's 10:01, 8:01. But
nothing but love.
Around the horn. We're going to talk about our time with you. The last word before a little bit of housekeeping will go to you. And Hanshi Legacy, what do you want to say about our time tonight?
I love this. I love this. I always love classical martial artists, and this guy is definitely a classical. We talked a little bit before we went on, and yeah, talking to a martial artist, really, again, when we talk about your style or what you do, there is always news there, but you can tell a person's experience by the way he feels inside. And that's the one thing that we all have in common. Okay. So again, I agree with Sensei Suino. We need more time with you. So hoping that maybe we can meet again sometime. And thank you very much for coming to our show. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Hanshi. Sensei Suino.
Man, I don't know what it is about this episode. This went by faster than for me. The experience of this, it went by in a blink. I know Randy writes down extensive notes and we'll review them with you in a moment, but I'll just tell you a couple of the highlights. First of all, the fact that you mentioned Kano, Professor Kano, and talked about his influence beyond judo. I wish more martial artists knew about the fact that he was not just some stodgy old judo player. He was a phenomenal innovator, internationalist, philosopher, thinker, amazing guy that we should all study if we really are serious about martial arts. I loved what you said about the next 5 years, about getting deeper into it, and how training and a life in martial arts can be transformative. You know, I say that to my students a lot, that you have to have faith in the process. If you're in it, you'll get enlightenments. You don't know when they're coming, but I guarantee if you're out of it, you don't get those enlightenments, right? So you have to have faith in the process. Transformations will happen at their own pace. I love the fact that you said that you try hard not to live with regrets. My answer on episode 1 of this podcast was, I have no regrets. And it's not that I've never done anything that wasn't a failure or a mistake, but I try not to live with regrets. I try to move forward. And then, man, I just want to get under the hood with you on a conversation about biomechanics, traditional martial arts, how to become more effective, pressure testing. To me, that's like the complicated, delivery system of energy, and it's a deep, convoluted conversation that I hope we can have at some point.
Thanks, Sensei Suino. Sensei Dofan.
Kyoshi, I write all kinds of notes, as they've said. And if you've watched any of the episodes, you know that I do. And then I watch them later and get more things out. But again, just what you said about even just saying sensei, right? It's important the way you say it. You don't just spout it off. Sensei, oh, sensei, like, no, you got to say it with reverence. It's important the way you say it. When you talked about a Budoka, you said living your days to that moral standard. That's like, everything you've said has been like very intelligent and very deep. Like there's a lot of things that we've talked about for people to think about, right? It's fun to be hurt. The students in here, man, they like it. Like you get a black eye, you get a bloody lip, you get bruises. Like my wife, like when she leaves here after she's been fighting and I get home, she's like, look at my forearms. I got these bruises here, right? Like, so yeah, it's weird that we feel that way, but you're right. It is fun to get hurt. Like we all like that, right? Not injured, hurt, right? There's a distinction between being injured and being hurt, right? Hurt, you come back from instantly. Injured takes you away from training. So let's not be injured. Let's get hurt. Leader with a compassionate heart, right? Like you got to have these tough people who are great leaders and they have to have a compassionate heart. That's a great sensei. When you find that person, stay with that person. Again, you said it, there was always compassion. When you were training with those people who were older than you, twice your age, they were always compassionate to you. That doesn't mean they went easy on you. That just meant, they cared about you. You would sacrifice more if you needed to keep the dojo going, whereas other people wanted to do less. You're like, come on, guys, like we need to sacrifice more here, right? That's a great mentality. The reason to come needs to be more than all the reasons not to come. That's a statement. Like, your reason to come needs to be more than all the reasons not to come, because there's always going to be reasons not to come. Right? Every day, all the time, you're going to find them. Most effective move, understanding yourself. What do you want God to say? God can say whatever he wants. Right? Like, that's a good answer, right? He can say whatever he wants. Dehumanizing people is wrong, right? Like, I think that's an important thing. Like, I'm going to think about that a lot. In a war, it's all humans. That life force is the same. That life value is the same. Maybe the ideologies are wrong, but yeah, you can't dehumanize people. Everybody deserves that respect. Greatest achievement, being alive. Everybody should think about that. That's a great achievement for all of us. Every day we could not be alive, but we're waking up. And then you said, humans are naturally lazy creatures. That's true. The remote control was not invented out of necessity, right? Like, the remote control was invented because somebody didn't want to haul their ass across the room and change the channel. And then you said about dying, you also have lunch. It's actually true if you think about it, right? Like, everybody dies, everybody eats lunch. It's just another thing that happens, right? Kyoshi, listen, this is great. I've enjoyed meeting you, training with you, and I know we're going to do it more. And I'm really grateful that you come on the show with us. This has been a really great show. Like, it's outstanding what we've talked about. I think we could do like a weekly one, just us.
Yeah.
If one of us drops off, you're probably the next host.
Sensei Bodrug, I get to chip in so much during the thing, but I really just want to say that that concept of your best technique being understanding yourself, that resonates very deeply with me. I've avoided a lot of conflict or threatened a conflict based on knowing where I was at in that moment and what I was capable or not capable of in that moment. The other person, bit of an unknown quantity, or the other situation, it's not always a physical thing. But I just want to say that I'm going to sit and meditate on that, even though it's something I already resonate with deeply, because I love that answer. What do you want to say goodnight, Sensei Bodrug?
You know, I consider myself a man of few words, to be honest with you. And this has been great tonight. I feel so blessed. I'm really deeply honored. You guys are all stand-up gentlemen, and you know, thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for accepting me, inviting me to the show. Yeah, I love this conversation. There's a lot of avenues we can go down. We can peel the onion back much deeper. Happy to do that. You know, I've always been a deep thinker. I've always been someone that wanted to find the truth, which, you know, I accept as an elusive goalpost we'll probably never get to. But that's part of the adventure of life. It's just is discovery and search and trying to get as close to it as you can. So thank you so much for, you know, I'm very humbled. I'm very humbled. You know, I'm not used to getting attention and compliments. So thank you for everything and all of it. And I definitely want to spend more time with you guys on the mat. I absolutely would love to feel your energy on the mat. You know, having similar spirit and talking is wonderful, and then actually experiencing the mat together is a whole new thing. You know that, and you know, I'd be honored to be there with you.
Right on. I literally am blocks away from you. I am away until the fall, but I look forward to that, and we'll chat before that happens. I just want to say thank you to Mike Russell, Justin Shea, Andrei Sedashev, Robert Shlumsky, Jesse Villet-Vitao, Alden Adair, Sidney Dauphin, Josh Kitchens, and Christian Londold, who run our behind the scenes. They keep this thing going. They're why you know when the shows are. They do all that stuff. We don't, and we're so grateful for them. We don't have a show without them. Sensei Dauphin, what's coming up?
Well, before we do that, Sean, I will talk about what's coming up, but I want to just, I know Sensei Suno is just going to have to deal with me. He can pound me tomorrow when I get there, but you know, the JMAC 17-year anniversary is this weekend. He's done testing all week. Many people have passed and graded and leveled up. And tomorrow, people from Pennsylvania and Canada are going to come and stand in front of him so he can grade them, which I just want to say thank you. Like, again, traveling, no train tracks are getting in the way of these people, right? They're driving far distances to come to a sensei and have his opinion given on where they should be. And it's really important. The other thing I want to say is last weekend, Sensei Copeland did his tournament, first time in 3 years. It was such a good tournament. Everybody had such a fantastic time. The quality of martial arts was really high. As usual, the refereeing was good as usual. Sensei Copeland runs a really tight ship as usual. I just was so happy to walk in that room and see those banners and see those people and do that thing that was denied to us for 3 years, right? So thank you, Sensei Copeland, for doing your tournament, and congratulations on having such a successful event. And then what's coming up? Much of the same, rinse and repeat, right? Like that's what's coming up, rinse and repeat. So we got on the 29th, we got Jamie Mancini coming on July 6th. We have Vic Terrio, that's Johnny Terrio's brother, is coming on. Then on July 13th, we're taking a break because we got Camp Fuji going on. So when Camp Fuji is going on, it's not going to be easy for Sensei Legacy and I to get out of the campsite and get online. So we got a show with Rick Joslin that we previously aired coming on July 20th. Bernard Lideseur, that's Ben Lideseur's his father. So, and police officer, it's going to be a good show. And then on July 27th, again, we're away. Many of the hosts are away. And that's we're going to air a conversation with Sensei Legacy and I about Matsumura is going to air. And that's what's coming up, Sean.
Love that so much. Thank you so much, everybody. This has been such a wonderful conversation. And I'm just so excited about the second 100 round. I keep talking about it. We're so glad you're here with us. Be safe, everybody, and we'll see you next week. Thank you again, Senseis.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sensei.
Good night.